MT.
Hey, Sarah.
My name is Sarah. I work with the Living Archives Project, where we are collecting stories of how COVID-19 impacted various communities in Charlotte Mecklenburg County. Today is November 8th, 2022, and this week there were 140 reported cases of COVID-19 in Charlotte Mecklenburg County, which shows a steady average over the last 2 weeks. Therefore, MT is comfortable not wearing a mask today, but I am. Will you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm MT, and I am 18-month resident of Charlotte, North Carolina.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Tell us, where did you come from?
I came immediately from Seattle, Washington, where I'd been there for about 10 years.
Okay. Wow, 10 years in Seattle. Mm-hmm. What was that like, your transition? What was the differences between Seattle and Charlotte?
There's a world of difference between Seattle and Charlotte, but I've done moves across the country before, and I've lived many places, so it wasn't challenging in any particular way. Personally, I had to get accustomed to being warm again.
Yes.
And driving. I hadn't been driving in about 10 years, and getting the legs under me for looking for housing and starting up again, but all of that was fine. Work-wise, again, world of difference between Seattle and Charlotte, but libraries are libraries, and that's the good thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So tell me, MT, what do you do for work?
Sure. So I am the CEO and Chief Librarian of the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. Were you also the CEO at Seattle? We had different titles, but in effect the same thing. I was the Chief Librarian and Executive Director. Okay, That's incredible. And so your transition from both libraries, I bet they're very different, because very different cities, very different populations and clientele, but what would you say has been your favorite thing about transitioning from Seattle into Charlotte?
I don't know if there's a favorite thing in terms of I like the food, I like whatever. I just like the nature of trying something different. I really do. And so that was the good thing about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What was one of the most different things you've tried since coming?
Oh, different things I've tried. That tends to make me think about foods and that type of thing, or experiences. And I'm trying to think of what I've tried that's different. I can't say that I know anything that is different. I'm from the South, so I may just be remembering things from when I was growing up, but I can't think of anything.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah. Where from the South are you originally from?
I'm from Mississippi.
Mississippi, wow. So you're pretty used to the humidity.
No.
No?
I haven't lived here in 30 years, so I've gotten acclimated to a different climate, so it's a little challenging.
I can imagine. Yeah. Oh my goodness. One of my best friends lived in Seattle.
Oh, wow.
So I had the opportunity to visit her, and the climates are very different.
They're very different, so yeah.
I guess one big question I had for you, MT, was what got you into library work? Once I got into the work, I really enjoyed what I was doing, so that has kept me there. Mm-hmm. What got me into it was just a mere circumstance of my friends were all library science majors, and I hung out with them. Okay. And so that's really what made me think of it as a career. Yeah. Were you a big book reader growing up?
I was, and I still am a person who loves reading, and I read a lot growing up as a kid. So yeah. That had nothing to do with me becoming a librarian. Though.
Oh, that's okay. Most people when I meet, because I am not a librarian myself, so I'm learning all the ways, ins and outs of librarians. And a lot of them are like, I'm a bookworm. And so that's been a common thread.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Everyone's different.
Yeah.
So, MT, can you tell me a little bit about your transition? It sounds like you did the big move from Seattle into Charlotte during the pandemic. Is that correct?
Yes. I moved here in April of 2021. The pandemic had not been closed down in Seattle nor here in Charlotte. And I don't think the country had declared it closed. But certainly Charlotte was more open than Seattle was. When I left Seattle, things were still pretty much closed down. So that was the difference. But yes, I did move during the pandemic.
Okay. And so when the pandemic first kind of hit the U.S., it was around early 2020.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like being in Seattle? Because if I remember correctly, Seattle was hit pretty hard.
Seattle was the initial start of the pandemic, or the first recognized case in the United States, although that's a little debatable. Someone said there was someone in California, but the outbreak started in Seattle, right outside of Seattle in Kirkland. And it was... we were in the middle of several big things where we'd had large staff gatherings, so we were anxious around that time, but we had not been given direction to mask, to stay home. It was still early in that process. However, it was on the news everywhere, so we knew about it, and there were certainly concerns. However, I remember when we were asked to close the library, from our mayor, that we were asked to close down within 24 hours of her notice to me. And that started a whirlwind of work that we did not see coming, that we had not prepared for, that we had not even thought could occur.
Wow.
But we managed well.
Wow, I cannot imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, being one of the leaders of the library and getting that notice and being like, in 24 hours, you need to shut your door.
Yes, I had been flying that day. I stepped off a plane, turned my phone on like everyone does, and there were messages from the mayor's office saying, call us immediately. And when I called, they told me what they wanted, and I stayed at the airport about another hour and a half and talked to each one of my board members to let them know what was needed. And because we were independent from the mayor's office, the library board was the only one who could declare a closing. So we had to have an emergency board meeting the next day and make a decision on that. And we were able to buy some time and close 2 days later, though we were prepared to close that next day. And we were the first library in the country to decide we were going to close. So everyone started calling us, asking us what were we doing. But we were embargoed by the mayor's office and by the governor's, not by the governor's office, but by health officials, that they did not want us talking about closing. So we could not tell anyone we were closing. So people would call and ask, what are you going to do? And I would just say, I can't speak about it. And many people were able to deduce that we were going to close. And their reasoning was that they did not want to create a panic. But of course, not answering the question created a panic.
Of course.
We couldn't even tell staff. We could not tell staff, no.
You couldn't tell staff until the moment.
We could tell staff. The directive was that the mayor was going to release a statement the next day, and that was the delay. The statement didn't come. And so when the statement was to be released, we were going to be given 24 hours to shut everything down. And so she gave us that on a Thursday evening, and that Friday we were open 8 hours, whatever a regular day is, and closed. And that one day brought in so many people. Our bookshelves were devastated by the people checking out materials because they knew we didn't know when we would reopen.
Man, that's crazy. So you had probably an immense influx of people just coming in, flocking the library.
Because it was only when her letter was announced that she indicated they were closing the city down. And as a result of closing the city, parks, libraries, everything was going to be closed for the foreseeable future. And I think everyone thought it would probably be about 2 or 3 weeks, but we didn't know. Staff were thinking we'd be closed to the public, but that we would be able to come in to work. And so we left on that Friday and thought we'd be in that Monday. But Sunday night, the labor unions and the boards and the mayor's office all agreed that we would not go back into the office. And so we were closed to the public.
When you got that news, what did it feel like?
So it was not scary in the sense of It was not scary in the sense that we were going to have staff or the public getting sick. It was scary in the sense that we didn't know how big this thing was and what it could do.
Yeah.
And so that was scary for us. We were very fortunate. Seattle's a very labor-friendly environment, so there are lots of unions, and the unions really went to bat for their staff, their members, saying that they didn't think it was a safe place for their members to return, and as a result, we avoided a lot of illnesses. We did not have anyone in our system die from
That's amazing.
COVID. Or at least not as a result of their being at work.
Yeah.
If someone in their family became sick, we didn't know about it, but yeah.
So how did the staff respond in that moment where
Staff was afraid. Staff was not sure what was going on. No one really knew a lot about the illness at the time. And so we didn't know how it could be contracted. We didn't know any of that stuff. And so staff was hesitant to come back to work. I mean, up until we were closed, no one was really concerned in the sense of taking precautions and that type of thing. It was only when they close you're like, okay, this is bigger than whatever I think we might be doing. And so you have that post fear that, oh crap, what's going to happen now? Staff had a range of emotions, I think. I think, one, they were glad that we were not open for their safety. But then we had to start talking about how we would reopen. And they were very concerned that there had not been enough study on how to reopen an organization to the public. So there was concern about that. There was concern that if we didn't get people back to work, there could be layoffs. So that was it. That was just one more thing on top of everything that we had to think about. For those of us in administration, it was really how are we going to keep people safe and how are we going to deliver library services and how do we keep everyone employed? Because we did not want to lose anyone. And libraries were not, all of the employees for the city, as in most organizations or most cities or counties, were classified into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 staff. And if you were tier 1, you were considered essential. And libraries, rightfully so, were not considered essential in the sense of nurses, health, that type of thing. So there stood the chance that we would be laid off. Then there stood the chance that we needed to be redeployed. And legal concerns around unions dictated what they could or could not do. So we couldn't just tell someone they could go back and work in a different department. So we had to try to find work that they could do within a classification.
This is so interesting.
Yeah.
I don't really think about that. I mean, man, how long was Seattle Library shut down for?
So I came here, we were not open in April 2021 when I came here. So that was a year and a half after I left, and I don't direct from the grave, so I have not looked back to see what they're doing. But I know they are open, and I would imagine they started opening sometime that summer. But we were not open when I left March 31st. We were doing curbside service. We were delivering services, but not allowing anyone back in our buildings. We Seattle has a large homeless population and insecurely housed, so somewhere during the closure, maybe 3 months in, we needed to help the city offer resource services to the community. So we opened up 5 of our libraries as public restrooms so that the homeless populations could have access. And that was what we did. Those were the only people who were allowed into our buildings.
And when you guys started the curbside services, was there like policies put in place for staff?
Tons of policies, and we spent months just working through safety protocol before we could even consider curbside. We had to work through safety protocols.
So this is all going on. You're at home, I'm assuming.
I lived 4 blocks from work so I could get to the building.
Okay.
Some of us were going in, but not all of us, and we had to time our entries, and you had to be screened every time you went in, so you did the thermometer check and all of that. But I was going in maybe 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay. So what was that season like for you? Was it overwhelming?
When you're in the middle of it and you're trying to work through a lot of things, you don't think about the emotional toll that it takes on you. You're just really trying to say, how can I keep staff employed? How can I give services to the public? Because the public, Seattle's very much a reading city. And so after about 3 to 4 weeks, they were sick of the books that they had checked out, or they had read all of them. So they were like, how can I get them back to you? And at that time, we were quarantining books, so they would have to go and sit for 48 to 72 hours before we could even touch them and check them in. So there were just lots of little things we were having to do. So you were continuously busy. And there were, even though we did our work during the day, most evenings were relegated to union meetings. So we would have to meet with the unions at night to discuss progress of what we would do, or you were doing citywide unions. Most of our unions were most of the city's unions were in one union. Library staff was in a separate union, and they were trying to get the 2 unions to agree to the same things. So you found yourself in a lot of meetings, and you worked longer. You really, I think, we all realized we were working so much longer because you were doing work during the day and then union meetings at night, and you were creating communications to staff and all of that.
So even though a lot of your staff was at home and not working, you
even if I were we were very busy. And even if I were home working, it still was a long day.
I can imagine. What was your experience like? Well, I mean, you're so busy, I bet. But did you get to experience the isolation at all?
So Seattle shut down. I lived in the downtown area, so traffic was everywhere around me. Public transportation was everywhere around me. And if I were walking to work or if I were going to the grocery store, there were just very few people out. No matter the time of day. And the buses would go by, and Seattle is very dependent on public transportation. And they would just be empty going through. The trains were empty. It was just an empty space. I did have to travel some, so I would take the train to the airport, and I'd be the only one on the train. And you get to the airport, and you might see, this was when the airlines were doing every other seat, so you still had limited numbers of people on a plane. So it was just eerie, I guess. I loved it because I like both. I like the hustle and bustle of a city, but I could live in the quiet. I think personally, I was talking with a good friend who lived in the city all of the time. And that person still had to go to work, so we were doing one of those, where did you find masks? Can you buy me a set? Those types of things. And just talking. And then, of course, most of my family and friends are on the East Coast, so I was calling back here every day. So that's what really kept me going. Watched a lot of television.
Any good shows?
No, I am not. I didn't have Netflix or any of the streaming services, so I was just
watching
whatever came on. Watching a lot of the morning talk shows and just going through that.
Man, I mean, I cannot imagine being someone who lived in the city, such a busy city, to going to no one.
You just watched each week as a restaurant closed because they just didn't have the traffic coming into the downtown area. It was really interesting.
I can't imagine. And did that go on your whole time in Seattle until you moved out?
When So we lost a lot of businesses during that time, and our homeless populations grew. We were at the same time in the middle of a hepatitis outbreak. And one of the protocols in place was that we would not move people because they didn't want hepatitis to spread. Wow. So the homeless populations took up a large portion of the downtown corridor. And so you would see them as you moved about the city, but businesses closed. The only things that really remained open were the grocery stores and Target. We had a Target downtown. And the department stores opened after some period of time. They weren't closed very long, but no one was having to go to work, so you weren't really shopping for clothes or anything. So, but yeah. The parks and everything were closed, so we couldn't get into those. So those of us who lived in the downtown area, we lived on a waterfront, and so we were able to walk on the waterfront in the evenings or in the mornings or whatever time of day you needed to get out of the house. Cruise ships were denied access to Seattle, so for a full year we never saw the cruise ships come in, which was a big business for us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So did you get to do a lot of walking?
I walked a lot. I ate more, but I walked a lot. I gained weight, which was unfortunate, but I did walk a lot because I could, we were also trying to manage Zoom and virtual meetings, and so those were happening all day, every day, and we spent lots of time in administrative meetings to get out of that meeting and go into an operational meeting where you're trying to figure out how do I open curbside or how do I do this. So we were in lots of meetings, but you took your walks where you could, or you took them as walking meetings. Sometimes you would just say, I'll take my phone and I'm going for a walk, and you walked and talked to the person you needed to.
I was going to ask, was Seattle Library equipped to do programs virtually?
No.
Or you had to create that whole structure?
I think one of the most telling things for a lot of libraries, and especially Seattle, that many people don't think about, especially for a city with a reputation like Seattle, where many people, I believe, think that it's a city with a high income and people are well-to-do. And the pandemic showed us that they weren't. We had staff members who did not have laptops and computers, so they couldn't do work from home, or they were trying to do it from a phone, and we were like, this is crazy. So we spent a lot of time trying to give them computers to work from so that they could gear up. Then we had to train them on what to do, and then we had to help them create meetings and programs and that type of thing. And then we had a large part of the workforce whose job is physical. They are the ones who are moving and shelving the books, and so they didn't have programmatic work to do. And so you're then trying to find work for them. So,
that makes sense. Man, I remember during that time, Seattle also had a lot of different walks happening, different not riots.
Protests. We have a lot of protest marches in Seattle, with or without a pandemic. There were quite a few of them, and then during the pandemic, several came through, and those did not stop. We had a couple of other events that made national news that brought attention to the city for how we approach it. And then this was all in the height of George Floyd and all of that, so there were other incidents occurring at that same time that shed more light on some of the social issues the city faced.
What was that like for you during that time?
So I think for the George Floyd matter, that, being at home, you had a chance to watch things live. For me personally, and I said this to a lot of people when I was asked about it, for many of us, that was my first time ever seeing anyone killed. I watch TV, I've seen violence on TV, I see people get shot, but never a real person. So that was very unsettling for me to just experience someone being killed and no one doing anything. So I first had to reconcile with that, and then you face the matter of, okay, what is happening in this city and what is happening here? So there were lots of Black Lives Matter protests going on in the city of Seattle at that time, too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that any of your staff or any of the library connections are really impacted by these protests?
So Seattle's a very liberal city, and Seattle is a city that responds to social issues in a very strong way. They respond to social issues in a very strong way. And we had a couple of protests that turned violent in the sense of downtown businesses. Their glass windows were shattered. There was a little bit of theft and pilfering. There were marches. I remember after one big incident, so many people in the city came downtown with their own brooms and started helping clean up the city. So they took it very seriously, but they believed in their city and they love their city. Seattleites do, and they will come and help clean up. And it was just amazing how many people showed up for that. But there were lots of protests, and as was the case in a lot of places across the country, it shone a light on police brutality, and the city itself had to figure out how they were going to resolve that.
Did you see any changes happening or not quite?
So you see changes occurring, whether it's a lasting change is something different, but you certainly see changes occurring. There was a different approach to how our budgets are created, how much money is given to social issues, how much money is given to efforts to empower voices that aren't often heard. So you saw all of that occurring in Seattle. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about Seattle. Tia, I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is kind of one of the reasons why you moved from Seattle into Charlotte?
So that was my second time living in Seattle, so I love Seattle. I love that part of the country. And I had been there about 10 years, and I wasn't caught up in the Great Resignation. That was not a part of it. I didn't have any of those interests. I just decided that if I didn't leave soon, I was going to be there the rest of my life.
Okay.
And as much as I love Seattle, I thought I didn't want to stay in that job the rest of my life. I wanted to try other jobs, doing the same type of work. I love libraries, so it wasn't like I was trying to find a new profession, but I wanted to do it somewhere else.
Okay, awesome. And you did mention that while you're in Seattle, you talked to family that was back east. Mm-hmm. What was that like for you, being distanced from your family?
So it was challenging in the sense that, well, you don't live in Seattle and go home every weekend, so it wasn't like I was going to see them that much. But you did have something of a set schedule, and so you had to reassess and say, okay, do I really need to get on a plane right now? Yeah. And at some point, maybe fortunately, I was sharing with you that when I got the call, I was on a plane. I had just visited family. I was just coming back from visiting family, so that bought me about another 2 months. Okay. And then around the third month, I realized I needed to see my family somewhere. Yeah. And so we managed a way to come together. So we were fortunate in that regard. It was like, I don't want to change flights. I want just to fly one time. I don't want to get on another plane as a connector. So we found a city that we could all get to on one plane or one drive. And we did that. They were still having to work, so it wasn't like they could stop working either. So I think we all just pushed through. We had some who worked in the healthcare industry, so you sort of got an insight into how bad some things were. But you you talked every day, which was something you weren't always doing before. So there was that balancing out of things. So, yeah.
Well, that's amazing that you're still able to be so connected with your family. That's beautiful. T, before we started talking, we did this little activity together called a hand map. Is there anything from your hand map that you wanted to share with us? Anything that stuck out to you?
Sure. Well, I thought it was a very deeper dive into who I am and what I am, because these are not descriptors of myself that I would ordinarily use in a lot of ways, but I was more internally focused about myself. I was more forgiving about myself. I didn't put as many of the, well, I don't know that I put any of the harsher ways I oftentimes find myself describing myself. But I brought out the things that I think are very true as to who I am. I noted that I was an introvert. I knew that my engagements were that I was a friendly person, a respectful person, generally nice. My efforts to be at peace with the pandemic and how I coped were things that I've done before, friends, walking, so all of that came out. But no, I don't think anything was really earth-shattering about nothing would make me wake up in the middle of the night, so.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, and I appreciate you doing the activity with me. Was there anything that you were able to identify that you gained over the last 2-3 years?
I gained perspective, and I gained an appreciation for where people are. There were people who made some serious decisions about their work-life balance and their need to be back home, and I respected that because you toy with those ideas too. Yeah. So I gained an appreciation for their ability to do that and their decision to do that. I gained perspective on how people deal with illness or sickness or pandemics, so to speak, that bring about illness and sickness. I developed an appreciation for the things that our hospitals were going through. It's interesting, I didn't focus on any of the negatives about the pandemic or the negative approaches that some were taking with the pandemic. I just didn't focus on that. I didn't note anything like there were people who were denying it was occurring. I didn't get caught up in that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. To respect your time and honor you, I'm just going to follow up with one last question.
Okay.
Do you have any additional stories or experiences over the last 2 to 3 years that you would like to share with us?
Wow. I should have a story in there somewhere. But those 2 to 3 years went by in a blur. I guess that should have been something I could have called out. It went by in a blur. I was working, so I don't know of anything. I think the most surprising thing as I started coming to this side of the country as the job started firming up was how different the two cities were. Seattle was still so shut down, and I was talking with the people who I was meeting here, and they were like, "When we'll go out to dinner," and I was like, "Where? Who's feeding people?" And because my mindset was our restaurants aren't open in Seattle, and I was like, "Well, can we eat outside?" I'm trying to, and they're like, "It's December," and I'm like, "I don't care. I don't want to eat inside." So it was just a world of difference about how we were approaching it, and I just thought that was really interesting. We certainly had large cases occurring, but we did not have the large cases occurring of people congregating. I mean, when that mayor shut down that city shut down, and then the governor pretty much shut down the state. Yeah. I don't know what they did here, but I remember someone saying we were closed about 6 weeks and then we were open, and I'm like, gosh, that seems fast.
So different.
Yeah,
So different.
we were nowhere near open.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Auntie, I appreciate your time so much. And
Sure.
thank you for sharing your story. It was incredible to listen.
Oh, you're quite kind, but I enjoyed sharing, and I'm supportive of the project, so I'm happy to participate.
Thank you.